All right, and you can go.
This is Command Sergeant Major Ralph G. King. It's November 8th, 2013, Cutter Morning Star School, and we're in Miss Juicy's Gifted and Talented Classroom. Where were you when the war ended?
Where was I at? Well, I was in Veckel, the town of Veckel in Holland. Jumped in the town of Zaan, and then next to Eindhoven. And we went in and took Eindhoven that next day. That was to open up the road, keep the road clear for armored vehicles for the British to move on through. It was like a corridor where the 101st jumped, the 82nd jumped on up the corridor, and then the British clear up. And if you ever heard of where the bridge too far, that was up in Arnhem where the British jumped. So it was really not a complete success. But we walked up and down the roads every time the Germans tried to cut the lines, cut the road, and clear the road so the vehicles could keep moving through to get to the front. So I was wounded in the town of Veckel by a tank fire. They were shooting into the hedgerows and exploded and come down on us, and I was covered with shrapnel around, and I didn't even know I was wounded. I had a very $1 million wound, you might say, because that night my arm started swelling up, my wrist, and they sent me back to the aid station. They tried to operate, and they cut it up so bad they evacuated me all the way back then, and I went back to England. So that's the first wound I got was very light. The next I got wounded, of course, in Bastogne, and that was a major wound where I was hit in the shoulder with the same thing from a tank fire, shrapnel, and it broke my clavicle, and that's why I suppose saved my life again, because they were going to mark me ZI to go back to the zone of interior, and we was all told, you know, we'd take care of us, get back to our unit. So I wanted to get back, but they marked me limited assignment. They didn't think I could jump no more, but it didn't break my clavicle all the way through. It just took bones out of it. And so the time I got back to my unit, I was in Bonn, Germany when the war ended. So I didn't see a whole lot of combat.
How did you return home? How did you return home?
I returned home on one of these Liberty ships. It took us 15 days on the water to come back. There was a storm at sea, and they told the captains, I understand, to turn back after we got out a couple of days. But he said, no, you're going to get us home by Christmas. Well, he did. We landed in New York on the 25th of December on Christmas Day.
What about the reception by family in your community?
When I returned, there was nobody there at the thing except a Red Cross lady with donuts and coffee. But I mean, I was treated real well when I come back, got back home. I left from New York there to Indianapolis, and for Benjamin Harrison I was discharged. And I went on up to Gary, Indiana, and you couldn't, they just wanted to, you know, do everything for you. And then I re-enlisted, and I decided to visit my family, because I had time to use to get the report back to Fort Bragg, where I reported into the 82nd. And first I had an uncle who, well, my sister lived in Chicago, Des Plaines, and I visited them, and then my uncle lived in Iowa. He ran a tavern up there, so he kept me there, and about 2 weeks, and I had to get out of there. And I went on to South Dakota, and I had an uncle there up in the Black Hills, and worked with him in the timber for another week or so. And then I had the Butte, Montana. I went on to Butte, Montana, and visited my uncle there, and then on to Washington, Grand Coulee, Washington. My uncle there worked on the Grand Coulee Dam, and that's where they first signed me up for the VFW at that time. Of course, I never kept my dues up, or I'd have dues way back from '46. So, but anyway, that's where I went, and then I returned and reported in.
How was your readjustment to civilian life?
Well, I stayed in the service, so I didn't have much adjustment to do, you know. I just stayed in, and I enjoyed the service, and just kept re-enlisting. I ended up, after that, another 3 years, I had 6 years and considered getting out. Well, I decided, no, I'll stay in. So I re-enlisted again. At that time, they had come out with what they had, you could take a short discharge and re-enlist indefinite. So I went on an indefinite enlistment. They finally cut it out of the service. So I was one of the few that was on an indefinite. I didn't have to re-enlist anymore, just stayed in. And after you had, I think, 3 years, you could retire or get out of the service anytime you wanted to. But they finally cut it out, and no more.
Do you still have contact with fellow veterans? And are you in any memberships for like veterans organizations?
Yes, I'm in contact with some of them. My platoon leader, who jumped in Holland, is still living up at Glen, Illinois. But he's now, in the last year or so, he's got Alzheimer's, but he used to be instrumental in getting us together. In fact, I don't know what year it was now, about 95 or so, I believe, that we had them all here, or what we had in our own company, because he put letters out, and there was about 17 from my company, H Company, 506, that we had a reunion right here in Hot Springs. And then another assistant, he lives down in Florida, and I'm in contact with him. And I'm one in Michigan, so a few of them I'm still in contact with. But I belong to many organizations, the DAV, the Purple Heart, VFW, all of them. I'm life members, most all of them.
How did wartime experience affect your life?
Well, it's really, you know, as I say, I enjoyed the service and stayed in for 21 years. And if I would have been a sergeant major and had to stay in the office and not get back in the field, I might have considered staying in. But they assigned after I come back during the Korean War, I went to the Cold War was on, and Special Forces started in 1952, and they sent us in 53 over to Germany, and I was there for 4 years during the Cold War. Then I returned back, and the Vietnam War was starting at that time. They were sending people to LAOS and Vietnam, and so I went there in 61, 62, and when I returned, they assigned me down to Panama as a sergeant major of the 8th Special Forces Group. And all of our people were already in country in South and Latin America. We had teams in all the countries down there. But so I didn't care for sitting there in the office like that and not being out in the field and working with the troops. And I had 21 years in. I was eligible to retire with 20. And my wife at that time didn't care for Panama. I had a son who was ready to start the 9th grade, and he'd been in 13 schools already. And so I decided to retire and come here to Hot Springs. And I thought I'd get on at the National Park Service or the State Park Services, because during Special Forces training, my team went out to the Smoke Jumper School in Missoula, Montana. And that was the idea, to learn their equipment in case we had to be, blind drop behind lines without anything on the ground to guide us. They could just drop us in the woods, and we could survive and get to make contact and take care of what mission we got. So I enjoyed the life.
Life lessons learned from your service? Life lessons learned from your service.
Well, I remember one lesson, and that's to stay in school. Because, as I said, I didn't like English. I didn't know, my parents never finished the 8th grade. And I had no counseling. Nobody told me what to take, what to do. And of course, you try to take the easy way out. As a youngster, I know that's the way. But you need a counselor to try to guide you. And if you can make up your mind at that time, which way you want to go and take the necessary courses. But we only required to take 3 years of English, and I hated English. My teacher, I guess, was one thing that she'd get on me for saying the wrong things or using ain't or anything like that. So I cut out the 2 Englishes that I should have had. English 5 was speaking and debate, and English 8 was writing, literature. And the 2 things that I missed the most is what I should have had. Because once I got in the service and got to be an NCO where you have to give classes, you burn a lot of midnight oil trying to prepare yourself, not having the skills that you need to finish. So I encourage anybody to stay in school and do it, regardless of what profession you're going into.
How do you define freedom? How do you define freedom?
Freedom is a way so you can go and, do what you want, speak out, and write anything that you like. You caught me off mouth, I guess. I don't exactly know what to say about it, but it's just you be free to do it rather than be under a dictator type of government where every step you make, you got to look out or get hung for it. So.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, yes, I got a paper here that a teacher in Holland, we used to have 101st Division reunions, and he come here and he brought this over, but this was written by a Netherlands guy, and he is endorsed by our ex-commander, Maxwell Taylor. I commend this story to all youth everywhere, and I trust its true forth will be reflected as a contribution to peace throughout the world. He endorsed that, everybody's picture there with this guy. But this teacher telling what freedom means, what they had to go through with during World War II when it was occupied. It tells about the 101st dropping in on them and their first way of doing things. But it's about this youth who was dissatisfied with what he was doing, and that's why he gave him this lecture, I guess. And but all he wanted to do was play hockey, and he was walking to school and hit a sign because he had to do what he was being told to do, and didn't care for it. And it was, but it's a good article. I'll leave this with your teacher. Maybe it's something you all want to read sometime.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for everything you've done. And